Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my November wrap-up. Last month I managed to read 14 books, and I believe nearly all of them were on my TBR, which is pretty good for me, even though I didn't manage to do as much for the Believathon Readathon as I wanted to. I had a lot of fun participating in the Thousand Doors Readathon, but yes, let's get down to the books. So one of the first books that I read in one sitting actually was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is a novel in verse, and it is about our main character whose brother is shot in gang crime. He's very upset about this and he decides he's going to follow the revenge rule, which is if somebody hurts someone that you love, you hurt the person who caused that hurt. But on his journey to doing this, something happens which makes him have to think about his actions and the consequences of them. I thought this was a fantastic novel in verse. I think it handled its subject matter very well. I liked how it used the isolated and limited space to kind of drive home the themes that it's touching on. I think it did a very good job of digging into that emotion and saying a lot with the limited number of words that a novel in verse has. I especially liked the open ending. I think it's something that maybe isn't enough closure for a lot of people, but for me it was perfect. It was chilling, it was thought-provoking, and it's just something that is very true, this cycle of revenge, and yeah, it's just something that needs to be talked about, and I really liked how it was handled and talked about. The writing was fantastic and it gave me a lot of inspiration for writing my own novel in verse. I also reread Percy Jackson and The Last Olympian by Riordan. This is the fifth and final book in the original Percy Jackson series. I read this one for my Read It Backwards, so I'll leave a link to that down below and up above where you can watch my video which has my full thoughts on this book. And yeah, the first book follows Percy, who discovers that he is a demigod in Camp Half-Blood, and there is a prophecy and some quests that he can fulfill. I'm just keeping it vague because I don't have that much memory of the details in particular at the beginning of the series yet, but for this one I had so much fun. The nostalgia feels were real, going back into this world, back to Camp Half-Blood, to Percy and his gang. It was so fantastic. I did find the plot a little bit repetitive this time round, and it followed some plot tropes that I don't particularly enjoy, but either which way I just have so much love for this series, so I did really enjoy it. Then I read Artemis, Fowl and The Last Guardian, which is the last book in the Artemis Fowl series. I love this book so much. It was just so emotional to finish this series that I've been following all the way through, and for the very last time I am going to give you the spiel of the first book, which is about Artemis Fowl, who is this young child criminal mastermind, and he learns about the existence of the fairy people. If you kidnap a fairy, they have to give you the ransom gold to free them, and Artemis decides he wants that gold, but fairies might have magic and a few more tricks up their sleeve than Artemis Fowl expects. This series is absolutely fantastic and has made it into one of my all-time favourite series. It's just so much fun. This last book was brilliant. It managed to raise the stakes even more. Every single book Eoin Colfer has managed to raise the stakes, and I didn't think he could possibly do it again for this finale book, and he did, which was amazing. It was so great to see a villain that I love come back in this one again, causing even more trouble and havoc. There are dire consequences for everything happening, and you can really see the friendships that have shined through this entire series. There are some things along the way in this series that I didn't want to have happen, and they didn't happen, which surprises me and actually makes me very, very happy. Trying to be vague here so I don't give any spoilers. I can see how the very ending to this last book might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I quite liked it. I thought it was a solid ending. In fact, I was able to predict the ending a little bit, but that's just because I've been reading these books one every single month, so I've gotten used to the clues and hints that Eoin Colfer leaves as to what's going to happen plot-wise. So I was able to pick up on quite a few things, but it was still so much fun. I will say there were two things that I didn't particularly like, and that was at the beginning of the novel. One of them is a missed opportunity because the book before this one had to do with mental health, and I would have loved seeing that mental health theme extended in this one. And also when it talked about the recovery from the mental health situation, there was talks of being functional, and it just left the impression that if you are still recovering or if you are experiencing the mental illness, it means that you're not functional. as a backhand of being marked functional when you have recovered. So those two things were things that I didn't particularly like, but otherwise this was a very fun way to end the series. And I want to say thank you to Karenina for buddy reading every single book in this series with me for all these months. I've had so much fun reading with you, and Gaia is truly wonderful. Check out her channel down below. I think we should just carry right along with my buddy reads, and the next one that I read was The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. I buddy read this one with Raquel from Raquel Baggins. Her Instagram is currently on hiatus, but I'll leave a link to it down below nonetheless. So in this one we follow our main character Kara, and she has the ability to travel between alternative Earths. So there's multiple Earths with all of the people like duplicated on all of them, and you can only travel to an Earth if your version of yourself is dead on that Earth, and Kara is dead in all of the Earth versions except for 8 of them. So it's just about her and her travels through what she has to do for her job and such, and a lot more goes down. But I have to say I was very disappointed by this book. I thought the concept was absolutely amazing, but the execution was very poorly done. So before we get started, I do want to mention that we have a black bisexual main character, which is wonderful, and we do have some secondary non-binary characters who are just casually included. The non-binary sector of the house that we see in this one is just very casually integrated, and I really liked seeing that. We also have an FF romance, which is nice, but I wasn't convinced by the romance whatsoever. The romantic interest just felt very 2D for me, and I felt like all of the characters apart from our main character actually felt very flat and very 2D, even though we were seeing multiple versions of them at some points. It didn't hit home for me, it didn't land. I also feel like the way that the storylines were introduced in this one served the book so wrong, because of the fact that we had one storyline and characters were introduced for that storyline, and then the next storyline would happen and characters would be introduced for that storyline, etc, rather than meeting all of the characters and the storylines interweaving a bit more and making things a bit more complex and integrated, rather than introducing characters when it's convenient to the plot only. Speaking of convenient, everything was resolved far too easily and far too conveniently. I didn't feel like there were high stakes at all, and therefore everything felt boring to me because there was no suspense. There was a lack of suspense because things were just easily worked out. It just really... I wanted so much more for this book, and it didn't bring it to the table, which is such a shame because this edition is beautiful, but I just didn't like it. The next book that I buddy read was Seven Devils by Elizabeth May and Laura Lamb. I buddy read this with Chelsea from Chelsea Zhao, and she is fantastic. She has a really great channel, and she's got a very cute little Presley who appears in a lot of her videos, so I would definitely check out her channel if I were you, and I'll link that down below as well. But Seven Devils was a book that took me by surprise because I had a lot more fun with it than I expected for some reason. So this is a sci-fi space opera novel, and we follow this crew who are the resistance, and they are fighting against the Empire. The Empire is run by this horrible tyrant, and they've got some very big colonization plans that are very dire, and they need to stop it. Chloe and Eris have to work together, but Chloe hates Eris. I'll just leave the synopsis there because a lot of things happen and a lot of things go down, and I don't think my review is going to quite justify everything that happens in this book. I would like to let you know that Chloe, one of our main characters, is disabled. She uses a prosthetic limb, and I kind of liked how the disability was done in this one just because it's just casually integrated all through the book. We've got an FF romance in this one, which is always so lovely to see. We've got a diverse cast, we've got some black characters, we've got a trans character, which is always good to see. It was just ticking all my boxes in inclusivity, but also in it just being so much fun. The plot has lots of ups and downs. It does work a lot with flashbacks and then the present day storyline, and sometimes those flashbacks were a bit interrupting of the suspense because something suspenseful was happening, and then we'd be taken back into a flashback and it would kind of kill the suspense that we were just experiencing. But it was okay because the flashback gave us a lot of context. I also really like when I see the enemies to friends thing happening. That happens a lot with Artemis Fowl. You get friends, enemies to co-workers, and I like seeing the enemies to friendship blossom in this book as well. We follow a lot of characters, but I think it does most of these characters justice. A lot of these characters have gone through quite a bit of personal suffering at the hands of the Empire, which is why they're ready to fight against the Empire, and it was just so nice getting more information on each and every single one, on what makes them tick, and all of these characters kind of complement and contrast each other very well, which I liked in terms of the character development. I will say that my favourite characters were Eris and Nyx. I think they did a great job of complementing each other while contrasting each other in different ways, and I think Eris had a lot of inner turmoil in this book and it was handled so well, and Nyx had the same. There were some characters which felt weaker than others. For example, Cato, he was not a character that I was such a huge fan of, just because I feel like he was kind of thrown into the mix. But either which way, I had so much fun with this book, and I would really recommend it for sci-fi lovers. For people who liked Illuminae, I could really see you having fun with this one. It's a duology, and I definitely want to make sure I get to the second book in the series once it comes out. I will say that there are quite a few content warnings for this book, and if you're new here, I include content warnings, all the content warnings that I can think of, in the description box down below. And then for my last buddy read of the month, we read Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I buddy read this with Hannah Reads Way Too Much on Instagram, and I buddy read with Hannah before. She's truly lovely and her Instagram is pretty cool, so if I were you, I would check it out. But let's talk about Anna Karenina now. So this one, it's just not one for me. This is really a case of it's not you, it's me. So Anna Karenina is following a large array of characters, large array of characters throughout their romantic love lives and journeys. A lot of it has to do with falling in love with different people, what to do when you fall in love with somebody else even if you're married, or just about, you know, before marriage, choosing who you're going to fall in love with or choosing who you're going to end up with, and a lot about female autonomy in relationships. I think if you're someone who likes Pride and Prejudice, you will like this book, because it kind of has the same thing where it deals with a lot of unlikable characters, and it uses those unlikable characters to give commentary on a lot of different themes. Namely, I think female oppression in terms of relationships back in this time when this is set in Russia, and I just struggled with it. I really struggled. It does have a lot of cheating in this one, and cheating is something I don't actually like to read about, and this deals with that heavily, and I should have known that before I started it, but I didn't look into it enough to know that. And I don't know, I just didn't like any of the characters, and I know that sometimes you can get unlikable characters in such a way that you like them, but for me I just didn't like anybody except for Kitty and Levin, and they were kind of doing their own separate storyline. I will say that I liked how of the three main relationships that we follow, they all kind of contrast each other, and you can see how the judgments are made based on society, and you can see the unfair judgments that are made against some people, and you can see how some couples handle some of the struggles that they experience better than other couples. I really like seeing that contrast. I really like seeing the commentary that it brings about, you know, females' roles in relationships, male roles in relationships, and how society's opinions on them very much differ based on gender, even though that might not be fair, and who suffers more. I felt like all of that was done really well, and there are some philosophical discussions in this one which are really interesting and were very thought-provoking and were nice to read and discuss, but overall it just wasn't my cup of tea personally. I still think I would recommend this to a lot of people. It just wasn't suited to my reading taste. I can tell that it's a great classic. Of course, it's survived all of these years and it's got some really important things to say. Again, it's really a case of it's not you, it's me. And I do think someday I will read some more Leo Tolstoy that's not on this matter. It's not that I disliked it, it's just that I didn't love it, and I was kind of hoping to, especially with it being such a thick book. Then we've got a book that I read for class and I really enjoyed, and that is Passing by Nella Larsen. Passing is about these two women who used to be friends, and they are both women who could pass as white despite them being black. One of them decides to live their life without passing. They decide to marry someone black and just live among the black circles in 1929 America, and the other woman decides that she is going to try and pass as white, marries somebody white and lives in white social circles. After many years of being away from each other, these two women reconcile and their two different lives clash, and it's about what it's like living each of their lives. I thought this book was splendid. It's so short, but it still has so much in it. I'm currently in the process of writing one of my assignments for university on it, and I'm just having so much fun with that because this book is fantastic. It does so good with the themes of not only the black experience, but also how the black experience does differ when colorism is involved, when it comes to being white passing, when it comes to being a lighter shade of black. And it also talks a lot about the colorism that you can experience within the black community itself, with black peoples judging you or liking you more depending on the colour of your skin. I thought it was incredibly readable. The writing style was just so easy to sink into. The characters were incredibly complex and incredibly believable, and I very much liked the ambiguous and open ending. I thought it was the perfect tone for this novel to leave on. It leaves you thinking about the book so very much. It's also got some discrete themes in there that you can read into if you are studying it, for example, or if you just want to dig a little deeper into the novel, and I always appreciate seeing this. I thought it was really fantastic and I very much recommend this book. Then we've got the audiobook that I listened to on Script. Script is an audiobook service where you can read as many books as you want in a month, and I have a link to it down below where you can get 60 free days if you want to sign up down below. And I was feeling a bit of the blues because everybody was doing non-fiction November, but I already committed to 2 other readathons, so I wanted to, you know, participate a little bit, so I decided to listen to one non-fiction audiobook, and that was Twisted by Emma Dabiri, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that I picked it up in the end. So Twisted is a non-fiction book that's focused entirely on black hair, the history of black hair, the social and political and economic areas and things behind black hair, and it was fantastic. I learned so much about my own natural hairstyle and a bit more about the history of hairstyles. I feel like lots of people have been wanting to learn a lot more about the black experience right now, and also especially about black hair, and I would think I would really recommend this one. Emma Dabiri narrates it herself on Script, so you're just hearing her own words, and I liked how it was such a good blend of the personal experience but also factual history. So Emma is Afro-Irish, I believe, and she talks about what it means to be a light-skinned black Afro-Irish person growing up in Ireland and her experiences living in Britain as well. And then she also talks about some of the media that she grew up with, what it means to reclaim your time taking care and loving your own black hair. She does touch a little bit on black men and black male hairstyles as well, and I very much appreciated the economic side of things and some of the discussions she has there, and it's very clear and distinct when she's talking about her personal experience or when she's talking about factual things or when she's just making some opinionated statements. I always love seeing that distinction in my non-fiction. I just had such a blast with this, and I know she's got another book which I believe is called Don't Touch My Hair that I very much want to read now. The second read that I finished for university was As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, and I hated this. I actually didn't think I was going to enjoy it before I started, but I still read it for class, and lo and behold, I did not enjoy it. It's very hard to tell you what this one is about. I guess mostly it's about this family who have a death in the family. The mother is the one who dies, and they decide that they are going to carry her to where she wants to be buried, which is a long way away, and things happen along this journey. I just think 15 points of view is far too many. I didn't really even care about whose point of view it was because I didn't want to keep track of who was point of view I was in. There were 15 of them and it was just too many. The writing style of this one is also very frustrating. Just imagine if you're watching a film but you were only allowed to watch it out of the corner of your eye, so you had to pay very deep attention to actually understand what was happening, and for 2 moments in the book you're allowed to turn face on and really see clearly and obviously what's happening, but otherwise you have to keep looking from the corner of your eye. That's the best way I can describe the writing style to this one, because it's very abstract but at the same time it's very straightforward too, and I know those two things are very different, but that's the best way I can describe the writing style of this book, and it frustrated me to no degree because I just wanted to race through it even though it's not that long, but I just couldn't because I had to really pay attention. Mostly I struggled because I found it incredibly boring. All of the characters were unlikable in some respect or in some degree, and it just wasn't the one for me. It wasn't. Next up, I reread For Real by Alexis Hall. This is one of my favourite, maybe the favourite new adult novel that I've ever read. That's a romance. I reread this book all of the time, but this was the first time I got to reread it in physical copy because I bought it sometime in the middle of the year. If you want to know how often I reread this book, the last time I reread it was January, so that's only 10 months ago, but I just reread it so often. I just love it. So in this one we follow Toby. He's quite young, so just be aware this is an age gap romance, and he goes to a BDSM party and he meets this guy that he's really interested in, but the guy is significantly older than him and he doesn't want to be involved with a teenager, 19, so consenting teenager, but still. So he decides that there needs to be distance between them, and I guess it just goes from there. It is a BDSM romance and it is an age gap romance, and it is a very, very, very British romance. It's set in Britain and these characters are the pinnacle of British in some ways, so I absolutely love that aspect of it. I don't want to talk about it too much because I've talked about this so many times on my channel, but I have a long Goodreads review with all of my personal thoughts and I'm going to link that down below. Had such a blast rereading this. It was so fun. Recommend, recommend, recommend. And last but not least, the last time you'll be seeing this book on my channel for a while, I figure, the complete works of Shakespeare. I read 4 Shakespeare plays last month and I finished reading the complete works of Shakespeare. If you want to hear my thoughts on all of his plays, I did make a video where I tier ranked all of Shakespeare's plays as a way to celebrate and in a way to have fun. If you have already watched this video, you'll already know my thoughts on these 4 plays, but I'm going to give a quick recap here for anybody who has not watched that video but still wants to hear my thoughts on these last 4 Shakespeare plays. One of the plays that I read is As You Like It, and this one follows Rosalind, who goes into the forest to search for her love, and romantic drama ensues in a forest. It's very Shakespearean forest romance. I don't know why that's a Shakespeare trope, but it is, and it's full of that. It was quite fun, it was enjoyable. I do think it had, again, a bit of a sinister end to it where it tries to show that all of the couples end up living happily ever after, but one of the couples doesn't quite get the same happily ever after that everybody else gets. So it has that in it, but I found it to be very, very enjoyable. Another one that I read was The Comedy of Errors, and this one was just a hilarious comedy. We're following these double sets of twins who are long lost. So the twin set, like twin A and twin B, and then you've got twin A and twin B. Those 2 groups have been separated, but after several years they end up in the same town and they don't realize that their other twins are in the town, so lots of drama happens and it's quite funny and it's quite entertaining, and I can't wait to watch an adaptation because I think it's going to be such a laugh when I finally do. And then I also read The Merry Wives of Windsor. This is one that brings the character of Falstaff back, who is in the Henry IV Shakespeare plays, and it brings Falstaff back, and Falstaff decides that he wants to woo these 2 women, and these 2 women are married. They are wives, and the wives cotton on to what Falstaff is planning to do and decide to play some tricks on him and get a bit of fun revenge. I thought this one was enjoyable. It's just a good time. There's these wives who are just making a mockery of Falstaff, and we get to see women having fun and just having a romantic laugh. I just thought it was very, very entertaining. I love Falstaff as a character. He's hilarious and I'll never be tired of him. And then last but not least, we'll end this wrap up on a play that's called All's Well That Ends Well, and this is a play about this girl who helps out the king and gets to decide whoever she wants to marry, and she chooses to marry Bertram. However, Bertram doesn't want to marry her and it's kind of a forced marriage. She then decides that she wants to try and earn Bertram's love, and that's the storyline of the play. I do think it wasn't the best comedy just because the way that she tries to earn his love sits off with me, and it doesn't feel like a happily ever after, even though Shakespeare kind of intended it to be a happily ever after. It just feels a bit off. And when I say Shakespeare intended, I guess, I mean, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've phoned Shakespeare up. And oof, that's it. That's it for you and me, babes. So there you have it. Those are the 14 books that I read this month. I had quite a few 4 stars and lots of highs, but then there were a few dunces in there, and unfortunately there wasn't a new favourite this month, which is a shame, but it's okay because I read a lot of good 4-star books. Please let me know in the comment section down below, have you read any of these books? Are you intending to read any of them? And what was your favourite read in the month of November? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!